Do you love Australian native plants? Are you designing a native Australian garden? If you're planning to just pop in a few native plants from your local nursery without much more thought than that, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed. Your plants probably aren't going to thrive as well as what they could do if you really knew what you were doing, and that's going to mean they're less beautiful and they provide less habitat and food for your local wildlife. Watch this video right through to the end so that your Aussie native garden can become an abundant oasis for birds, lizards, worms, hoverflies, and all manner of locally indigenous flora. We'll discuss why you should choose natives over exotics, how to assess your local conditions, and a few different types of styles that you can go for, including rainforest gardens, coastal gardens, and a few others, all using Aussie natives. We'll also go over a few of the most popular Aussie native plants that have been rigorously tested in the urban landscape, as well as a few new and unusual cultivars that you may not have seen before. When European settlers first arrived in Australia, they tried to recreate the same types of gardens that they found in their homelands. However, this proved pretty challenging due to Australia's unique climate, soils, and other conditions. Some of the foreign plants they introduced struggled to adapt to the harsh Aussie conditions, and those that did thrive were only able to do so with constant water and care. In the 1960s and 70s, a significant shift occurred in Australian garden design with the rise of the native bushland style garden. Gardens designed in this style were typically easier to maintain, reflecting the resilience of native Australian plants in the bush. However, over time, the belief that native plants require minimal care just because they originated from the bush has started to change. Gardeners and landscapers are now beginning to understand that with the appropriate care and attention, native plants can not just survive, but they can thrive, becoming so much more than just a bush style when we afford them the tender loving care that we give to exotic plants. As the soil started to degrade in urban areas, plant breeders like Ausbreed have kept up by breeding plants that are more resilient than the native plants of the bush. They've become more tolerant to wet feet, drought, and have been specifically to become even less maintenance as well. But that doesn't mean that you can just pop a plant in and forget about it. This is a show garden from Mifgus. This is what's possible in a native Australian modern garden. It's a show garden at the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show from this year called The Circle of Life by Alphys Landscape Designs. It's a great example of a contemporary Aussie native garden design. Aussie native gardens offer a host of environmental, practical, and aesthetic benefits. They contribute significantly to local biodiversity by providing food sources and habitats for native wildlife. Food sources include pollen and nectar-rich flowers, seeds, as well as roots and leaves that turn into soil carbon that feed a wide range of organisms that feed higher level fauna such as birds and lizards. Habitat could include thickets of stems and leaves, as well as tree trunks and hollows that all provide a safe place for all types of different vertebrates and invertebrates to build their homes and to hide from predators. Many native Aussie plants have evolved and been bred to have lower water and nutrient requirements as well, meaning that they're more environmentally sustainable. Some of the practical benefits of an Australian native garden is that they're usually lower maintenance than a garden with exotic species, and that's because native plants are typically better adapted to local soils and climate conditions, as I mentioned. However, it is important to note that while many Australian native plants do offer these benefits, it's definitely an overgeneralisation to say they're all better for biodiversity and they're all lower maintenance than exotic alternatives. Different plants have different needs and native plants are no different to that. With that being said though, Australian native gardens are always a celebration of our unique flora and they hold a special place in our national psyche. Before we can even talk about plants, you're going to need to understand your site's conditions. That includes soil type, climate, sunlight exposure, and other environmental factors. Otherwise you're just going to put your plants in and they're going to die. This is really beginner stuff, but I'll quickly rush through a few basic principles for you. Identify your climate zone. Australia has a diverse range of different climates, from tropical in the north to temperate in the south, Mediterranean out to the west, and arid in the centre. Knowing your climate zone is going to help you determine which native plants are best for your area. Sunlight exposure. So walk around the garden, check out which parts of your garden receive full sun, partial shade, or different types of sunlight throughout the day. Some native plants like Banksias thrive in full sun, while others like tree ferns prefer shaded areas. Test your soil. Soil type can significantly impact plant health. You can conduct a simple soil test to determine its pH level and a more thorough lab test to go a little bit deeper than that. Most Aussie native plants prefer slightly acidic to neutral pH levels, but there are of course exceptions. Certain native plants, particularly Proteaceae members, are sensitive to nutrient overload, especially once they've become established within the landscape. Evaluate moisture capacity. When you water the soil, is it soaking in or is it just rolling off the top? Compacted and heavy clays can be amended with gypsum to break them apart. Meanwhile, sandy soils can become hydrophobic, meaning that the large soil particles become coated in plant waxes and then there isn't enough moisture to support the organisms that would actually break those down. Soil wetters can be used to immediately break down those waxes, and then you can use a quality hydrogel like terracotta or a kaolin clay like soil solver to prevent issues in the longer term. Choose the right plant for the right place. Understand your chosen plant's needs, and then make sure that they're going to fit into the space you want to put them into. For example, if you've got lots of coastal wind, put in stuff like westringias and pig faces, because they're going to be able to withstand both the salt and the wind. Here are a few garden design ideas for different styles and sizes of garden. Coastal gardens. For gardens near the coast, consider planting some hardy natives like coastal banksias, westringias and pigface that are going to be able to withstand the wind and the salt sprays. Dry gardens. In arid climates, opt for drought-tolerant species like native grasses, kangaroo paws and bottle brushes. In fact, most of the plants we breed here at Ausbreed are actually specifically bred to withstand dry environments, even if the plants weren't from dry regions originally in Australia. If you've got a shaded, moist garden, create a lush rainforest feel with tree ferns, lily pillies, and Tristaniopsis. Small urban gardens. Even in a small city garden, you can create a beautiful native garden haven with compact species like a columnar lily pilly, such as Strata narrosyzygium, correas, and native grasses like poas and pennisetums. Now let's have a chat about some no-fuss, functional, and reliable Aussie plants. Sweeper Waterhousia floribunda. Sweeper Waterhousia is an improved variety with a heavily weeping habit and elegant rippled leaves. It's a much denser form and is highly myrtle rust resistant. It produces large clusters of white flowers in summer, and its foliage is much denser, so it's perfect for large dense screening, a street tree, or even planting near hardscapes, because it creates a softening effect in a harsh concrete environment. It's not really suitable for courtyards or small gardens due to its size. It'll grow to 10 metres high and 5 metres to 8 metres wide. Position this plant in full sun to part shade and avoid hot or dry exposed inland regions. It does tolerate cold and drought, and it'll do well in drainage to heavy clay loams. It works really well in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia and WA. Katie Bell's Lomandra hystrix. Katie Bell's Lomandra is probably the best performing evergreen Australian native rain garden plant that's ever existed. It treats you with stunning, highly perfumed masses of flowers from September to November, year after year, sometimes repeat flowering in autumn. It'll grow up to 1.5 to 1.8 metres high by 1.2 to 1.5 metres wide. Use it in mass plantings for wet and dry landscapes, at the edge of watercourses, drainage channels, rain gardens or specimen planting. Position Katie Bell in full sun to heavy shade. It works really well in Queensland, New South Wales, ACT, Victoria, Tasmania, South Australia and WA. Everlasting Megagold and Nigerxanthos. Everlasting Megagold kangaroo paws are a mid-sized, longer-lived kangaroo paw that get far less black spot in comparison to other short-lived kangaroo paws. It has large gold flowers all year round, except in colder climates where it won't flower in the winter months. It's tolerant of frost and drought, and it'll grow up to 55 centimetres high by 55 centimetres wide. Its flowers will reach from 90 centimetres to a metre high. It's perfect for all types of gardens, borders, mass plantings and in pots. And of course the flowers look great in flower arrangements. Position this plant in full sun. It works really well in New South Wales, ACT, Victoria, Tasmania, South Australia, Western Australia and even in Queensland, although in northern Queensland it can be shorter lived. Aussie Rambler Carpobrodus. The Aussie Rambler pigface is a prostrate, ground-covering creeping succulent that has long trailing stems up to 2 metres. It produces large, deep pink flowers in spring and autumn with purple stems. It's great for rockeries, mass plantings, as a sand dune stabiliser, or for any low maintenance gardens in inland and coastal positions. It grows up to 20 centimetres high and 2 metres wide, and it loves full sun to light shade, working well in most soil types. It tolerates frost, drought, humidity and salt, but avoid prolonged wet feet. It works perfectly in Queensland, although it hasn't been tested in northern Queensland. Works well in New South Wales, ACT, Victoria, Tasmania, South Australia and WA. It's also grown well in Canberra with temperatures down to -8 degrees Celsius. Luscious Tristaniopsis. Luscious Tristaniopsis has gorgeous shiny foliage topped off with red coloured new growth and yellow flowers that have a sweet perfume. Its larger leaf size in the common form makes it a great native alternative to magnolias. Its bark is a striking port colour that peels back to reveal a mottled cream stem. On top of that, it's also highly myrtle rust resistant. It'll grow up to 7 to 12 metres high and 5 metres wide and loves full sun to part shade. It tolerates a bit of frost and drought, but it really loves a warm, moist position. Luscious Tristoniopsis works really well in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia and WA. Blue Gem Westringia. This Westringia flowers profusely in spring and regularly at other times of the year with bluish purple flowers. It's the most vivid flowering Westringia that we've ever seen. It works great in native gardens or in any flower garden and can be pruned to a shape as required. Use this plant instead of English box hedges. It'll grow to 1 to 1.5 metres high by 80 centimetres to 1.3 metres wide. It loves full sun to light shade and suits sandy to well-drained clay soils. It does tolerate cold and drought, but just avoid wet feet or depressed planting areas. It works really well in New South Wales, ACT, Victoria, South Australia and Southeast Queensland, although it's not suited to northern Queensland. Fluoroburst Callistemon. This is a brand spanking new callistemon cultivar that will look completely different to the ones in your neighbours' yards. It's got hot fluoro pink flowers and is great for attracting bees and native birds. It's a semi-compact and low-maintenance callistemon that requires little to no pruning to maintain its tidy form. It'll grow up to 1 to 1.5 metres high by 90 centimetres to 1.2 metres wide. Planted in full sun to part shade, and it works in most soil types. It's got great drought and frost tolerance once it's established. It works in New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, WA and South Queensland, but more testing is required for North Queensland and ACT. Pink Fusion Scaevola. This is a pretty yet tough flowering ground cover. In fact, it's probably the toughest, most useful Australian landscape flower in existence. That's a pretty big claim, but it's got some truly remarkable characteristics. The very first plant, which was installed in a harsh, poor, heavy roadside soil, still looks awesome 11 years later with practically no maintenance. And it's flowered for more than 70% of the time. More recent plantings also coped really well in the extreme heat of the East Coast. This type's very different from the regular Scaevola as it was bred from a species that grows in harsher Aussie climates. It's more compact and tighter, meaning that it requires far less pruning. But it's not just tough and low maintenance, it's also gorgeous. The compact green foliage is covered in beautiful pink fan flowers for most of the year. It outcompetes weeds and it can be used as a ground cover. Its size is about 30 centimetres high by about 1.2 metres wide. It tolerates heat and cold extremes, sun to light shade, and can live in most soil types. It even handles poor soils. It's likely to work Australia-wide based on the testing that we've done. Firebells Coria. This brand spanking new Coria cultivar has vibrant orange-red flowers in winter and early spring. It's perfect for small gardens and patios because it's compact, dense, and works great as a ground cover. It needs very little pruning to stay compact, making it perfect for containers and small gardens. It also has low water requirements once it's established, and is really good for attracting birds to your gardens. Its mature size is around about 25 centimetres high by 80 centimetres wide. Planted in full sun to light shade in reasonably well-drained soil. However, it is actually adaptable to most soil types. It tolerates drought and frost as well, and works really well in Victoria, ACT, South Australia, WA, Tasmania, southern New South Wales, and in Sydney, as long as it's in a good, well-draining soil. Now, we've talked about a lot of different stuff in this video, from design principles to Australian garden history to specific plant choices. If you're a little bit ADHD like me, you probably weren't able to take it all in one go. So maybe you should save this video and watch it again in a few days. Put it on repeat while you're working in the garden or just while you're going to and from work. Once you've given it a couple of watches or listens, it's time to start planning. Maybe you need to pick up a measuring tape, a pencil and a pad and then map out your new garden design. Or maybe it's just a matter of cutting back the weeds, removing a few exotic plants and replacing them with natives that you're sure are going to thrive in your environment. Either way, just make sure you're enjoying each step of the journey because gardening isn't a chore, it's a joy. Subscribe to Ausbreed for more advice just like this.